So a new ban list just dropped a couple of days ago, and Konami just leaked all of the cards that are coming out in Burst Protocol. So now I can give a proper tier list of what is going to be good, what is going to be bad, and what's going to be like in the middle, what's going to be like decent or whatever. So let's just get started with the first few decks. So here we have the Assault Mode deck. I don't think this deck is real at all. I think this is more like a Genesis deck. If they don't point this stuff, it's like an engine that you could play that can get you to an Omni Negate with the Stardust Assault mode. But besides that, I don't think it's like that good. It can also like bridge into Punk stuff, but I don't think it's going to be relevant in the TCG. I think it's going to be just a Genesis deck. Another deck that's going to be probably a Genesis deck. I think this deck it's not terrible. It's definitely not terrible at all. But with the amount of board breakers, with the amount of like decks that could just break through the fair board of Sword Soul, I don't think this deck is going to be great. I think they needed something like Protoss to be unfair in this type of format, but even Protoss is like not even that great. If you call like Dark, like does that really help? Not really. Maybe against like Mitsurugi, maybe against like Malice, but like besides that, like you're really not going to get anything. Even with Protoss being unbanned, I don't think this deck is going to be that great, but it's still like really good in Genesis. I think all these decks in Get Out, they're not bad decks, but I think the other decks on the top are they're just more resilient to stuff like board breakers and hand traps. So I think these two decks they're just Genesis decks at the end of the day. Mitsurugi, I think Mitsurugi is like a tier 2 deck. I think it's really solid. Habakiri 1-1, obviously. There's probably going to be a lot of hybrid versions with this deck. I don't think people are going to play it pure because I think pure is a little bit too inconsistent. It was already kind of inconsistent already, which is why people combined it with the Yummy deck, because now you have the Yummy part of the deck. So if you don't have the Mitsurugi part of the deck, you can bridge from the Yummy part of the deck. But now without Herald of the Arclight, I don't think the deck is going to be bridging with Yummy or be played with Yummy moving forward. But I still think the cards are very high quality. I think they're still really good. So I think they're going to see play next format. A decent bit. I don't think it's going to be as good as the decks in tier 1, but it's still going to be a solid deck. Next we have Art Mage. I'll put this in Rogue. Art Mage, they're not getting a crazy support in Blazing Dominion or Domination. I forgot what it exactly called, but the next core set after Burst Protocol, they're going to get really good support. But I think it's still pretty decent. We've seen Coder top a regional or win a regional with the Art Mage cards. So I think the cards are really good. They're really high quality, but they do get a lot better in the next set. And I think just the other decks are just a little bit better than Art Mage. The next deck is White Forest. Again, another deck that I think is pretty solid. It's kind of like the combo slop category of decks. I think it's still really solid. It does lose to stuff like Droll, but Droll went to 2, so it's a little bit better. Maybe I should put it in the tier 2 category, but I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that great. It's just another combo deck that is it just does combo stuff, and it's just not great going second. And board breakers are good, so that is something that White Forest has in its arsenal. That board breakers are good in this format, so maybe it's a little bit better than I'm expecting it to be, but for the most part, I think White Forest is just a solid deck. It's just a solid like rogue regional type deck. Maybe it could like top a YCS with some luck, but besides that, I don't think it's that great. Branded is another deck. I'm not sure how good this deck is going to be. It's like either the top of rogue or like tier 2. A lot of people always talk about Branded, like Branded is good, Branded is like okay, Branded is like decent, but every time it just like it comes in the format and then it just goes immediately because people realize the deck is just not that great. But with the new Branded and White Dragon, it's definitely a lot better. It doesn't rely on Branded Infusion anymore, so it doesn't have that big choke point anymore, but it's still kind of weird because Branded Fusion is such a good card, but then it conflicts with the new Branded support and Burst Protocol. So I don't know. It's still a deck that can summon like Ito and stuff like that, which is honestly crazy. Like that, the Albion card should have been banned like eons ago, but What am I to say? It's Konami, but I think Branded's pretty decent. I think Branded is pretty decent. The next deck is Crystron. I think Crystron is like the top of tier 2. Crystron K9 is probably going to be the best version of Crystron, and I think Crystron K9 is just very scary deck. They can set up a multiple like negates with stuff like Ripper. They can set up Infinity. They can set up Dawn Dragster, which all of those cards are really good against stuff like the Dracoel deck and the Radiant Typhoon deck. So, especially Spell Canceller. Spell Canceller is still a thing they can do in this deck, and that really cooks stuff like Dracoel and stuff like Radiant Typhoon. So this deck is going to be very, very scary in the next format, especially with the boost of inclusion to 3. So I think the deck is going to be very, very powerful. Even though we did get hits to stuff like Dracoel in case for K9, I think the deck is still very powerful. I think it's going to rely more on the Crystron cards, similar to what happened with Vanquish Soul. Because like stuff like Raisin and Stake Your Soul went to 1, people focus more on the K9 stuff, but you still played the VS cards because they complemented the K9 cards. So I think this is going to be the same thing, just you're going to be focusing more on the Crystron cards, which are not even bad. Even if you just do the Crystron combo, I think it's still very solid in today's format. The next deck we have is Dark Lord. I think Dark Lord is a solid deck. I don't think it's like crazy. I don't know where I would put this at. I think it's a little bit too underwhelming in terms of like the end board, but it's still good. It's still like can win you games, but it just seems a little too weak sometimes. Like if you get interacted with, they either fold or they end on such a weak board that literally any deck can break. So the deck is like, and it's also a little bit inconsistent. I think it's a little bit inconsistent as well. And I don't know. It's just very, very mid, which is why it's in the rogue category. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's bad at all. Definitely not a terrible deck, but I think it just a little bit too weak. Kind of like Exo Sister. I'm just going to put Exo Sister in the same category. I think Exo Sister is probably somewhere here. I think a lot of people are going to put it like tier 2 because it's a new deck. A lot of people are going to play this deck, and I know that a lot of people just love Exo Sister. Exo Sister is just a simple deck that a lot of you could just pick up and play. But the problem with the deck is that, again, with something like Dark Lords, it's just a little bit too weak, especially to the best decks in the format. It just doesn't do enough against stuff like Radiant Typhoon and Dracoel to where it's not great. It just does more Exo Sister stuff. It's more consistent, and you get that negate with the Carmel card, but again, it's just not enough. I think you rely heavily on floodgates, stuff like Di-Fi and Macrocosmos even. But besides that, like in Shifter, because you do have one Shifter, but with only one Shifter in Di-Fi for your floodgates, like I don't think this deck is like really solid. I think if you had like maybe Shifter to 3, I think it would be in the tier 2 category because you could reliably Shifter people, and that's pretty good in the format. But besides that, I don't think the deck is like that great. It's just too weak to the top decks and just has two bad matchups into the top 2 decks of the format to where if it had a better matchup against like the top decks, I would put it in tier 2 100%, but it just doesn't have great matchups into the top 2 decks of the format. DDD, I think DDD is probably the best combo slot out of the like main like 4 or 5 combo slot decks. I think it puts up decent amount of interruptions. It plays through hand traps, but it's kind of weak into Fua. I think Droll is also like kind of iffy against the deck as well. But DDD is just another one of those combo decks that are just it's either hit or miss. It depends on like what the format is, what people are playing, what are the matchups like the top decks, and if it's decent enough. Like the non-engine, you don't really need that much non-engine because a lot of these decks, they can't play non-engine as well, so that makes them weaker going second. So depending on if there's not a lot of engine needed in your deck, so like say for instance the most of the non-ninjas is like mulch armies. Like maybe it could do solid, but it's just weakened to stuff like Fua. So I don't know. The deck is just, it's just an okay deck. I don't think it's crazy. It's just one of those other combo decks, again, as I said before. Blue Eyes is in kind of a terrible spot. It's not great because it plays a lot of hand traps, and while hand traps are not terrible, I think a lot of people are saying like hand traps are like terrible. It's just not fair. It's too fair. It's too fair. Again, like all these other decks, it just doesn't put enough interruption by itself, and like hand traps are not gonna help you against stuff like Dracoel. If they resolve like a 5 mana or a Cat2 or something like that going second against Blue Eyes, they're just gonna tear through your board. They're just going to destroy your board. It doesn't matter if you have Ash Blossom. It doesn't matter if you have Bell. If they resolve a fusion card or a fusion spell against your deck, you're kind of cooked. Especially if they have multiple Dracoels, because they're going to be resolving all these effects, and then now you're in a grind game against Dracoel and you just lose. Same thing with something like Radiant Typhoon. They just cook you. Pretty much just cook you. So I just think this deck is in a terrible spot. It's not like a terrible deck. I think a lot of people really disrespect this deck, but I think it's just in a bad spot right now. It's just in a bad spot. Elvinotes, I think Elvinotes is another tier 2 deck. I think it's pretty solid. It's just very weird with this deck because we don't know the best variant of this deck. It's going to take a lot of testing to figure out what is the best variant of the Elvinotes deck. But I know the most popular variant of the deck is the Fiendsmith variant, and I think it's pretty good. It is kind of weak to Fua, kind of weak to Pearly. It just depends on like what your hand is and like how many hand traps you have in your hand, because the deck can play a decent amount of hand trap. It can play up to like 18, like 20 non-engine. So I think that really helps the deck. But the fact that it's just weak to Fua, somewhat, because of the Fiendsmith cards, and then Pearly is also pretty decent against the deck. I don't know. It's just a weird deck to analyze. Like it's just a little too undiscovered. But I think the Elvinote cards, they read very good, and I think that with the proper sub engine with the deck is going to push it to the next level, which is the tier 2 category. I don't think it's Rogue. Maybe it is in Rogue. Maybe it's Rogue. Maybe I'm hyping it up a little bit too much, and maybe even Branded. I think Branded is probably a little bit too high, but I don't know. I think both of these decks are pretty solid and can be in the tier 2 category because they just have a lot of potential in the format. It just depends on like how people are building the deck, what type of non-engine is good in the format, and how well it pairs up against the top 2 decks in the format, which I think is going to be Dracoel and the Radiant Typhoon deck. Rockets is another deck that's kind of mid. I'm just gonna put it in the get out category. I don't think it's that good. They didn't get Savage Dragon. It's weak into all of the Charmies, basically. But like, I don't know. It's not good. They didn't get Chaos Space to 3, like stuff like that. Like, just they get a lot better in the next set. When they get the next wave of support, I think it's going to be a lot better. But for now, I don't think it's that good. I think there's just better combo decks that you can play in this format, like White Forest or DDDs or Art Mage or whatever. Dracoel is the best deck of the format. The Dracoel branded deck is just very, very strong, very, very oppressive, and it just doesn't have that many weaknesses. I think that's the biggest upside of playing something like Dracoel, is that it doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. You can't really like pinpoint what card like definitively stops Dracoel. Like Ash Blossom doesn't really stop Dracoel. Bell, while being good going second, doesn't stop Dracoel. Even something like Retaliancy is a lot worse because of the branded cards, since you can like fuse to stuff like Cartesia, and you also still have 5 mana at 3s, so dodging stuff like Retaliancy, just the deck just doesn't have that many weaknesses, and it has a lot of strengths to it. Plays through a lot of hand traps, plays through a lot of board breakers. It sets up a good amount of interruptions going first, so it plays a lot of non-engine. Probably a little less than it did before, but it still plays a lot of non-engine. So I think the deck is like still the best deck in the format like it was before. I think it definitely was the best deck of last format, especially towards the end. I think people were realizing that, and then now with the new support of the branded cards, I think it's definitely solidifying itself as the best deck of the format. Anacraft, just another one of those decks. I think it's in the get out category. Let's just get it out for now until they get the new support in Blazing Dominion or Domination, whatever it's called. I don't think the deck is really that great. It's just one of those decks that just take too long to finish out a duel. Like you're sitting there grinding out with your opponent, and then like you can't really kill them, and then you just lose because you just can't end the game. You can grind with your opponent, but like that's not enough. Like Dracoel can grind, Radiant Typhoon can grind, like all these decks can grind. Like why would you play something like Anacraft that just can't really do anything? Like I just don't see the point. So it's in the get out category until maybe the next core booster set where it gets more support. Fire King, I think Fire King is pretty solid. I'd probably put it somewhere. I think I'd put it like right here. I think it's better than Exo Sister, honestly. I think it has a better matchup into stuff like Radiant Typhoon and Dracoel, but it's still pretty weak. It can play the Dominus cards, which is really good. Like Dominus Impulse is really good against something like Dracoel, which makes it a little bit better than something like Exo Sister. But it's still kind of weak. It just doesn't do enough. It's same thing with Exo Sister. It just doesn't do enough, which is why it's in the same category. You're seeing a pattern. Like all of these decks, they kind of do the same thing. Like look at Elvinotes, DDD, White Force, Archmage. They're kind of like combo type decks. Maybe even a little mid-range, but they just all kind of do the same thing, but they're not really particularly great or worse. It just honestly depends on like what the format is. Same thing with like Fire King and Exo Sister. I think they're kind of in the same category, but I think Fire King's is a little bit better because of how the meta is shaped right now. I think it's just a little bit better than something like Exo Sister that's just weak into stuff like Dracoel and especially Radiant Typhoon. So I think Fire King is pretty decent. Orcus, I think Orcus is a pretty slept on deck. I think Orcus is one of the better decks of the format. It's just really good. It's like one of those like mid-range decks that a lot of people just don't really think about, especially the Mitsurugi Orcus deck. It's really scary to win. You have like this deck that floats constantly. It has like all this grind game, and it can set up a decent amount of interruption, especially with the Orcus Mitsu variant. You could play through a lot of hand traps. Like it just seems impossible to hand trap this deck or even board break this deck because it just has a lot of layered disruption. So it's just a really powerful deck, I feel like, and they're a very slept on deck. I would say it just a little bit too clunky sometimes. Like you could draw like a bunch of normal summons, or like I don't know, you can just brick sometimes if you're playing like the pure variant. But I think it's like pretty solid. It can play a decent amount of non-engine as well if you're not playing like the Mitsurugi engine. But if you are playing the Mitsurugi engine, it makes you better into like different hand traps and stuff like that. So I think it's pretty solid. I think it's like probably on the lower end of tier 2, but I still think it's pretty powerful. Gem Knights, I think Gem Knights is probably the most underrated deck of the format. Same thing with Orcus. Like both of these Battles of Legend decks are just, they're really good. I think they're really solid, especially Gem Knight. I think Gem Knight is just really well positioned in the format, especially if we're again having a board breaker format. Gem Knight is just really good at breaking the Dracoel board. Is going to be really good against the Radiant Typhoon deck. Is going to be really good into it's probably the worst into something like Crystron, because you can sell stuff like Spell Canceller and you can't use stuff like Lightning Storm or the Fallen the Virtuous and stuff like that. All these other like board breaker cards they play in their deck is just a little bit worse, but I still think Gem Knights is going to be very solid just because it has very good matchups into Dracoel and into the Radiant Typhoon deck. And being able to summon Christia turn 1 is still going to be very powerful. Probably a little worse because of stuff being the non-engine being board breakers, but I still think it's pretty decent. I still think it's pretty solid. Let's speed through a lot of these like mid decks to like bad decks. Let's start off with Rescue Ace. Rescue Ace is pretty bad. I think Rockets is better than all of these decks. But Rescue Ace, it's just really bad. The new support is terrible. It's kind of awful. Like, I was like, yo, this support doesn't seem that bad until you actually play it, or you play against the deck and you realize the deck doesn't have like a 1-card combo that works with like Hydrant. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, it just feels bad, and it without like OSS or original Sinful Spoils, like this deck is just, it's just not great. It's not even worth looking at all. GMX, this is the new TCD exclusive deck. I don't think it's like crazy by itself, but I think it has potential. Definitely 100% it has potential with stuff like Fur Hire deck, but I don't think the Fur Hire deck is like that great. So I think it's in the get out category for now. I don't think the cards are bad at all. I think a lot of people are like, oh, these cards are bad, these cards are terrible, but I think they read very good, and with the proper engine with this deck, it's potentially a very solid deck. I don't think it's like the greatest deck of all time, but it's definitely pretty solid. Hecka Hands, yeah, I don't know about this deck. It's like whatever. The Hecka Hands Chimera deck is like pretty neat. You could summon the Diabell card that can just basically cook the Radiant Typhoon deck, but besides that, it's like, I don't know, maybe I should put it like up here. I don't think it's like that terrible, but it's just not great. Like, it's just pretty weak into stuff like board breakers again, and just stuff like that. It's just not great. It's not great. The Chimera deck is just, it's just not it. Magna Warriors, I don't know how to even judge this deck. I've seen very little of this deck, but it just seems like another combo slop deck. Let's just put it in the rogue category to save time. Sky Striker, I think it's like a decent deck. I think it's like one of the better decks of the format. I still think it's rogue. I don't think people are going to play it a crazy amount, but if board breakers are really good and people are playing less Droll because Dracoel just doesn't lose to Droll, I think Sky Striker is going to have a better time. Maybe I should put it in the tier 2 category. I don't think it's like that terrible in the format. You're seeing a lot of it in the OCG right now because it's just very well positioned into stuff like Dracoel. It's decent into Mitsurugi. It's decent into the Radiant Typhoon deck and stuff like that. I think its worst matchups was like Malice and just other combo slop decks. So without the combo slop decks, I think it's going to be a lot better. But if you see stuff like Crystron setting up Spell Canceller, like, it's going to be a lot worse. I think it's going to be not really that great, but I think it's like up here, like top of rogue, maybe tier 2. I'll put in the rogue category for now, because I think these decks are a lot better. But yeah, I think it's still a really solid deck, probably potentially even tier 2. I'll just keep it up here for now. Fur Hire, I think this is the most overrated deck of Burst Protocol. I think it's really not that good. I've seen a lot of people gassing up this deck. I just think it's not good. Like, I think if you're gonna play K9 cards, you're probably going to be playing Crystron. I think Crystron is just way better, or Vanquishal. Like, both those decks are way better than the Fur cards. Like, I don't even like the quality of the Fur cards. Like, the new cards are really good, but the older cards, they're just not really that great. They're not really that great. They don't play in hand traps very well. The Rex Gale for Hire being able to play into the Molt armies is like cute, but it's not great as well. Like, the deck just seemed very mid. If you only draw the Fur Hire cards, it's very, very bad. Compared to like the Crystron cards or like the Vanquishal cards. Like the Vanquishal card, like both those decks, they produce a good amount of interruption. They're very good into the next format. But like the Fur Hire cards are just, they're very mid. They're very mid. I don't really like this deck that much, even though I love Fur Hire. Fur Hire is one of my favorite decks to play, at least in like Duel Links and stuff like that. So when it got like new support in the TCG like a couple of years ago, I was like a fan of it, but I think it was better back then. But now it's just really not that good. It's just really not that good. Labyrinth, let's just put this in the get out category. I don't think this deck is like that good either. It's it's been getting a lot worse recently. Like, it was not even that great back when it was like a decent deck, but now it's just even worse because stuff like Dracoel and Radiant Typhoon absolutely cooked this deck. There's stuff like Ash Blossom in the format. There's a lot of Ash Blossom in the format. There's a lot of Bell in the format. There's gonna be a decent amount of Impulse in the format. Like, I just don't think this deck is really that great, like, at all. Like, there's no reason to play this deck unless you just like the deck. Killer Toon is another deck. I think it's like in the bottom of Rogue. It's like in the same category of something like Blue Eyes, but again, it just doesn't do enough. It had a really good matchup into Yummy, but that was like, I don't think really good. I think really good is kind of pushing it. I think it had a decent matchup against Yummy, but now that Yummy is kind of dead, I think Killer Toon is gonna have a rougher time against stuff like Dracoel and Radiant Typhoon. So until we get the new support, maybe when we get the new support, we'll look back into this deck and see if it's great or not, or like decent. But for now, it's just another rogue deck you could play. Lunalight. I think Lunalight is in the top. I think it's worse than Gem Knight. Probably even worse than Mitsurugi, honestly. But it's still a really solid deck. I'm just gonna put Sky Striker here. Maybe even Orcus here. I think there's just more rogue because a lot of people are not gonna be playing this deck, to be honest. I think people are more looking towards like stuff like Lunalights, Mitsurugi, Crystron K9, Dracoel, etc., etc. You know. But Lunalights is going to be looked at as one of the most scary decks to play into next format because, again, Liger Dancer is one of the most oppressive cards, one of the most toxic cards in the format because it's just unoutable. And then going second against this deck, or this deck going second, it just feels impossible not to die to if they have a good enough hand. So this deck is just very scary. The problem with this deck, I just feel like it's a little bit too weak into like the weaker non-engine, which people are playing stuff like Ash Blossom, stuff like Bell, Impulse, Imperm, Valor. Like, all of these low impact hand traps can just stop the deck from playing, but I think the deck is like a lot scarier going second because stuff like Heavy Poly being able to just go into Liger Dancer instantly is just very threatening. Stuff like Lunalight Fusion being able to instantly go into Liger Dancer is very scary. So I think the deck is very good. It just depends on like how people respect the deck. I think a lot of people are going to respect the deck, but even with the respect to the deck, I think it's still going to be a solid pick because it just has decent matchups into stuff like Dracoel and Radiant Typhoon. But yeah, I think the deck is very solid. I don't think it's crazy. Again, it's a little bit too weak into interruptions sometimes, but other times it just feels like it plays through a lot. It just plays through everything. And then it has a lot of good half boards and stuff like the Molcharmies and stuff like that. So yeah, I think the deck is pretty solid. BANLIST is just another combo slot deck. I don't think it's dead. I definitely don't think it's dead, but it's definitely one of the worst combo slot decks. It's gonna turn into like a cyber slot deck more and more. Like, it's turning from a Malice deck because the deck had all these Malice cards at 3, but now with all the Malice cards being banned and at 1 and stuff like that, I just think it turns into like a cyber slot deck to where it's like every other combo slot deck that it's good going first, but going second it could just get cooked. It is what it is. Memento, I think, is like probably one of the worst of the combo decks. Memento just has a bad matchup into, like, again, the low impact hand traps, stuff like Ash Blossom, stuff like Bell, stuff like if people are still playing Retaliating Sea is really good against this deck. Like, Impulse is good against this deck. Like, all these low impact hand traps are just very solid. And then if you look at the Radiant Typhoon deck, like, they have all these MSTs to negate all of your extenders. And if they have a way to stop your one play, like your one Horse, your one Angel Witch, your one Dark Blade, like, you just lose the game. And then against something like Dracoel, all 3 of their trap cards are insane against your deck. And Arthelion's good against your deck. So they have to play through Sting, which is like insanely broken against that deck. You have the whatchamacallit, the Flame that negates any of your extenders. You have the Horn, so like if you normal summon Dark Blade, they could just like bounce your card back, and then GG. You're cooked. You're cooked. You're basically cooked. So I think Memento is probably the worst out of all the combo decks, besides like Malice, because the Malice is barely even playable at this point. The next deck is Mermail. I think Mermail is the best out of all the combo decks. I'm gonna gas this up. This is no bias. This is no bias at all. I'm not even capping. This is probably the best rogue deck. Probably even in the tier. You know what? I'm gonna put it in the tier 2 category because I've seen a lot of people disrespect Mermail right now because the deck is not dead 100%. This deck could put up a floodgate in the case of Newman. Newman is basically a better card than the water bearer statue because it's better into something like Dracoel. So they could still put up a floodgate. They can still play through a lot of interactions because of something like Nephthybis. Going second, Poseidon is an insane card going second because it just forces out so many interruptions. Like it just doesn't play into stuff like Radiant Typhoon because they have to pop their own cards because Mermail does not play any spell and track cards for the most part. They play like 1-for-1 and that's it. So like the deck is just very solid and it could just tear through a lot of fair end boards. Like if you Motarmy, you Perulia, or like you Ash Blossom and they end like on a decent board and you draw a decent amount, a decent hand, like if you draw like Nephthybis or Poseidra or like Dragoons or something like that, like any of these combination of 2-card combos or like 3-card combos, you just absolutely like play through so many interruptions going second. So it's just the best going second deck, or like the best combo deck going second into the format, to where it's just better. And then it's a little worse. Like the water bearer statue was just so consistently good against everything except like maybe Dracoel. The Newman card, you could play around it because you can summon monsters under 1800 attack or less, so it's a little better or a little easier to play around, but it still restricts you. And with the other interruption that the deck has, it could draw a bunch of cards. It can set up multiple pops and bounces with the Poseidon card. So it just has a lot of interruption going first, and then going second, it's pretty decent against stuff like Dracoel and Radiant Typhoon because the interruptions are not like, they're not terrible. Again, they're not terrible, but they're not like the best, like something like the Memento deck, to where like all the cards are very insane against the deck. So like I just think Mermail just is very, very solid into the next format, and probably the best sleeper pick of the format because it's just gonna catch a lot of people off guard. So I think this deck is really solid. If people are hyping up the Fur Hire deck, which I think is just not really that great, I think it's the most overhyped trash of like all time, I think I can hype up Mermail. And I have like actual logic to back it up. Like I'm literally telling you that this deck is like the best combo deck going second, because a lot of these other combo decks, they just aren't really that good, or they just don't set up good like half boards as well. Like Mermail has a decent half board because it could just rip to have a pop, and then you have like stuff like Impulse, Ash Blossom, and stuff like that to like beat your opponent and give them 0 draws. So I think this deck is really solid, and it can play as itself like Perulian. Like it just doesn't care. Like it gives your opponent like 1 or 2 draws, and that's it. So I think this deck is pretty solid. Radiant Typhoon, we talked about it already. Radiant Typhoon is going to be one of the best decks. Maybe a little lower, maybe the top of tier 2 or tier 1. I'm just gonna put it in tier 1. I think it's really solid. It has a really good, I don't think it's really good, it has a decent Dracoel matchup, and it's just really, really solid. It's very scary. It plays a lot of board breakers, so it can just break through a lot of just boards going second. It just really depends on how good these other combo stop decks like Mermail or Crystron K9 or like DDD or like whatever, like all these other combo stop decks, it really depends on how good they are, because if you can't go second with board breakers, then Radiant Typhoon is a lot worse, because they really can't rely on playing hand traps, because they want to play quick play spells. They want to play all these board breakers. So I think Radiant Typhoon, it really depends on how good board breakers are, depending on like if it's tier 1 or like at the top of tier 2. I think it's going to be like tier 1. I think it's definitely going to be played, but Maybe further on in the format, if people like expect stuff like Radiant Typhoon in the format, it's going to be a lot worse. So maybe I should put it here for right now. But it's still the top 3, 4, 5th best deck of the format, at least. I think it's going to be at least like the top 3 or 4 deck in the format. Vanquish Soul, I think Vanquish Soul is going to be pretty solid. I'm going to put it in the tier 1 category just because it has a really good matchup into Dracoel. And it just sets up a very scary board. It got so much consistent. It got so much more consistent with the Stake Your Soul and Raisin going to 3 that like now you could focus more on the Vanquish Soul part of the deck. Yeah, they lost Halisu, which it wasn't that crazy. Like sometimes you would get it, but like most of the time you were not resolving Halisu going second, especially with 1 Raisin. But with Raisin going to 3, Stake Your Soul going to 3, like the deck, it's just once they set up their combo with the Vanquish Soul cards, it's so hard to outgrind them. It's so hard to like kill them through that because they just set up so many interruptions. They summon so many bodies. And with the K9 part of the deck, it just becomes a lot harder to even break that board. So with the cards just being very good into Dracoel, being good into Radiant Typhoon, good into a lot of these other decks, you can play a decent amount of non-engine. I think it's a solid deck. I think it's very solid, even with stuff like Dracoel in case for K9 going to 1. I think you just focus more on the Vanquish Soul cards and maybe even not play the Vanquish Soul cards. There's even a case to not even play those cards in the deck, but whether you play the K9 cards or not, I think the deck is just very, very solid just because of how good the quality of the Vanquish Soul cards are. Odeon, this deck is like the bottom of Rogue. I don't think it's like terrible. I don't think it's like the worst, but it has such a bad matchup into Dracoel. It has such a bad matchup into Radiant Typhoon. But the game plan is just simply just stop your opponent from playing. If you could do that, it doesn't matter if they have stuff like MSC and stuff like that. But like going second, like this deck is just so much worse. It's just so much worse. But I think it's still playable. I think it's still like a rogue deck that you could play and maybe do well at like a regional. But it is at the very, very bottom of rogue. It's at the very, very bottom. It's just not really that good into any of the top decks. It just gets cooked by all of them, basically. But if you have a bunch of hand traps, it doesn't matter because you're just gonna hand trap them to death, and then you can just set up your Odeon stuff, and it just doesn't matter. But I don't think hand traps are that crazy, anyways. Like Dracoel plays to that, anyways. So like it's just not great. It's just not great. Tri-Brigade. Tri-Brigade is just it's like pure Tri-Brigade is not good. I think Tri-Brigade Yummy is probably a lot better. Probably somewhere around here, somewhere maybe better than these decks, maybe better, something like right here is where I would categorize the decks. I don't think it's that great. Yummy is going to be like a hybrid version or a hybrid deck for the most part. Pure Yummy is just not great. It's just not great. Like you needed multiple snatchies to even compete. With one snatchy is not good. But the variants like the Tri-Brigade Yummy, I've seen like other variants of Yummy. I've seen people try to play Mitsu Yummy still. I don't think it's terrible, but it's not what it used to be. It's definitely not what it used to be. It's definitely in the rogue category for now. But it's definitely still like a decent deck. I don't think it's terrible. I don't think it's the worst thing ever. Cupsies still reads very good. Like they play through a lot of hand traps. It's just a lot worse to the board breakers, and if board breakers are going to be in the format, then the deck is just not great. And then Ryzeal, I think Ryzeal is a little underrated. I don't think it's like that great, but I think it's still pretty solid. Like Ryzeal, Onomat, stuff like that. They're still really solid. It's still very scary to go second against this deck, but then again, like the deck just without the crazy floodgates that got banned on the ban list before the last ban list, it's not crazy enough. But I think it's still really solid. It's another one of those just combo slot decks again. Like there's so many combo slot decks. Like it just depends on which one is the best. It just depends on which one is the best. And I think Crystron K9 is just the best one for now. Just because like the deck is just crazy. Like Ripper is just such a crazy card. It just plays through so much, and the Crystron cards are very high quality as well. So I just think if you're gonna play a combo slap deck, it's most likely Crystron or even Mermail, or like any of these other two decks like Gem Knight or Lunalights that are crazy going second. So that is it, guys. That is it for the tier list. This is a long tier list, but this will give you an idea of what the format is going to be like. I'm gonna put Radiant Typhoon here, but I think these are the top 3 decks: Dracoel, Vanguard, and Radiant Typhoon. Even if they're not that great, they're going to be expected to be the best decks in the format, along with like Crystron K9. You're still gonna see Anthony Yugioh play Gem Knights. Mitsurugi is going to be very popular. Lunalights is going to be very popular, and then any other of the combo slot decks like Mermail and stuff like that, you're going to see them. Exorcist is probably going to be popular. I don't think it's going to be that great. Dark Lords is probably going to be a little bit popular, but just not that great. And then stuff like Elvinotes, it just like Elvinotes, Branded, Rizal, Sky Striker, like all these like decks right here is like, it's unpredictable as to how well they're going to be in the format. They might move up or down depending on how the format shapes, but I still think they're very solid decks, which is why they're at the top of Rogue. So that is it, guys. Let me know what you guys think about this tier list, and I'm out. Peace.